air on that. So from 2021 to 2022, so 2021, 22 to 2022 to 23, it's the rural women participation that increased from 37% to 42%. During the same time period, the urban women population just increased from 24 to 25%. So if you look at which kind of women are in the labor force, largely rural women. If you would look at further classifying this data, you would note that out of this 37%, 90% of women are in informal sectors, informal jobs in agriculture, in textile, etc., where women do not have access to decent quality jobs, and only 8 to 10% are those which are in formal jobs in companies. Now, when it comes to companies, I can go on and on. There is also a difference of pay gap. PLFS data say that self-employed men earns 2.8 times more, which is exactly rupees 15,763, than self-employed women, which is rupees 5,637 for the same kind of job. So what is going on here? Why is this discrepancy, and what are the challenges? Another statistic that is very relevant for this group is also we are talking about changing world of work, where we are looking at technology boom. We are looking at also the impact of climate change, right, on all of us. So the world is changing, and therefore the work is also changing. But if you would look at in India, it's a very sort of curious picture here. So in India, there are 42% of women who graduate in science, technology, engineering, and maths. This percentage is greater than many European countries, UK as well. When it comes to this conversion from education to employment, only 27% of the women are in STEM jobs. So what is so the point is that there are forces that are working which doesn't which are not which are beyond skills, which are beyond equal sort of the kind of parenting that you have you were raised. The issue then comes is really around the mindsets that prevail, but also the structural constraints. So another statistics that I want to share with you is that if women have to participate in the economy, somebody have to take care of your children, your cooking requirements, your cleaning requirements. So in India, again government data, women perform 10 times more time care work, and the global average is 2.8 times than men. So here in India, women are spending a lot of time on care work, and that is also one of the reasons that is not allowing them to participate in the economy, because it is thought that is predominantly a woman's job, which is not. Care is everybody's job. So there are issues in our in the system which are coming from patriarchal notions and structural constraints that are limiting women's participation in the economy. But all is not only. There are very good examples that you will hear from them in terms of how they're breaking these barriers. So let me take a pause here and enjoy that.
You couldn't have had this data from a better person. So your authority on the data that you have heard points out the gaps. And just a little bit of that from my own research is that there is a strong correlation between education and employability and domestic violence. So the countries and the states in India where the domestic violence is highest, you will see a definite correlation between education and employability of women. So that's food for thought for all of us. We will again keep talking about the changing world of work and women. Over to you, Vika.
Thank you. And Amita, I would really take a cue from the exercise that you did to understand that we are sitting in a room of fairly privileged people. And since we are sitting in a room of privileged men and women, what I understand is we have entered a day and age where everyone needs to have something called a hip pocket skill. It is a day and age of specialization All of you are studying MBAs, all of you are going to go on to specialize in something. But in that, I think, all of you need to find what is that one area that interests you. And I'm not talking about an area that interests you to become a social media influencer, but go a little more than that. One skill, one little ability of yours that sets you apart from the rest of them is what is going to stand you out in the world of work. People are going to go after you. Today, if someone has generic skills, yes, that person will also be valuable. But if today someone comes to me with a more specific skill, I would look at that girl and that boy, and irrespective of gender, I will look at the skill that the person brings to the table. Unconventional professions, something I have been very passionate about. And I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. I come from very traditional parents. One a doctor, another who was in management, who taught at Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. So my mom, who's a doctor, wanted me to become a doctor. I actually appeared for something called joint entrance when I was of probably your age, a little younger to you. I stood 36th in all of India. A year later, I dropped out of my medical school because of ragging. I did not continue to become a doctor. Did I miss anything? I don't think, except my mother still tells me that I have wasted a seat in a medical college and I have wasted the public money. But beyond that, I don't think I miss anything. I have had various diversions in my career. Went on to become a sports journalist, which was not heard of in my time. I was the only woman sports editor in the country when I became the sports editor. But I think, what I learned along the way is not is to be able to thrive, I needed to have more skills than the men who were in the business. And whenever I entered the newsroom, whichever day, I had to be the best man in the business and not the best woman in the business, because in my times it was the best man in the business who cannot question me for my ability, my understanding, and things that I do. The one other thing before I pass on the mic to you is whatever you do, whatever you go on to do, know your subject 360 degree. And that is something that holds a person out. I mean, with much respect to you for citing the data that you have, it's because it comes out of your research, right? Knowing your subject, your research. I think all of us need to be researched about what we are talking about and know our subject 360 degrees. That is, by the way, one of the tips I can give you that you can own as your hip pocket skill.
Thank you, Rita. That's fantastic. I think I'm loud enough. Moving on to Diana.
Thank you guys. It doesn't feel long. I think 20 years ago, I would exactly be sitting where you are sitting, not very far away from here at the IIT Delhi campus in the Dogra Hall, and look at a stage exactly like this in social. खाते क्या है कि यहाँ पहुँच जाते हैं? What is in this? How do I get there? What will I do? How do I get out of this campus and become one of these people who are sitting on the stage? And if I don't know if any of you is having that thought today, I would love to end by the end of this session, leave some food for you to say, yeah, ऐसा क्या करना है? What do you need to do? So that 20 years hence, you are the ones who are sitting here and talking to your fellows on what it takes. And that's, I think, the first vision that you need to have in this changing world of careers. That fire, that desire, because everybody thinks, at least for me, I'm an entrepreneur. Everybody thinks entrepreneurship is sexy. It's a nice thing to do. Were chased with heavy valuations, great money, Shark Tank fame, being on the TV or on the media. But nobody talks about how it is a roller coaster ride. How there are more lows that come into an entrepreneurship and then highs at time. And nobody celebrates those lows. So in this changing world, I think it's very important that you have something very close to your heart that you genuinely can keep going on for, which can sustain you through those lows, exactly like the 360-degree knowledge that Rika said to build your career. For me, that came with a vision that I want to make solar cheaper than coal in India. So 2010, I stood up and I said, I will start a firm which will produce solar plants. People looked at me like, "Pagal, as a woman, you want to start an infrastructure firm." And I went to my dad and I said, Dad, this is what I want to do. This is the dream I'm feeling. This is how I think I'll change chairs from there to here. And my dad told me a very simple thing. Tanya, dreams have no gender. For all the men out there, I tell you a very dear friend from me for campus runs one of the biggest lingerie brand in India. For me as a woman, I run a large solar company, a company for which I have raised over 2,000 crores and it's now listed on the London Stock Exchange. None of them were driven by what clothes I wear or what gender I have. It was driven by a simple, sheer thing of persistent passions, of staying through those lows and building that. And I think that's one common theme you'll find across all these people on stage. We have all failed, but failure is not the big thing. Muhammad Ali says it's not you're not beaten when you go down. It is when you don't come back up. So, in this changing world of career, have something that is so close to your heart that can take you through those lows. Don't bias that with anything, whether it's gender, whether it's money, whether it's what the world thinks about it. Just bias it by can you keep doing it consistently, persistently, and whatever it takes, and be at it.
Fantastic inputs. Over to you, Niharika.
I think I have a little bit to add to what everyone said. Especially, with Samira, you said that care should be for both genders. Why is it only for women? I remember, I had this image, I had this aspiration that I'm going to be at one of the, top consulting firms. I wanted to see of a corporate job, and that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I was on the path of. So I graduated from Hindu College, did consulting for 2 years. I was preparing for MBA, got through ISB Hyderabad, thought, okay, now this is my career, I'm going to be set. And COVID happened. And then I decided that, okay, I don't want to do an online MBA, let me defer my admission. And somebody told me, like a relative told me, that, you always wanted to do a corporate job, you anyway end up doing that. Why don't you think of starting something of your own? You have a year to, pass. Yeah. And that's when I reached out to my co-founders, I got to know them and what they were building. And, when they told me about what they were thinking of, the idea of bronies, I didn't think if it would make money. I didn't think if it would be a profitable business, what valuation I'd get, nothing. I just remembered that throughout my life, I've seen my mother struggle with household work. I've seen her go in gullies of Kotla, Okla, and whatnot to just get a decent helper who could look after her kids and she could go to work. And I think that's such a pain point for women today. I know personally of customers who call me crying, saying that they're not able to get back to work after pregnancy, or their in-laws are not supporting them and they really need your help. So I think that's what I'm on a mission of, to obviously uplift the workers, domestic workers who've always been exploited, get them to workforce, and to have women like us step out and have rewarding careers, because that is so incredibly hard today. Even as a founder of Broomies right now, I know that the household responsibility at my house is not equal. I end up working more and I end up doing so much more than my counterpart. And that's the reality, and I'm obviously changing it every day, pushing it every day, but that's a hard reality. So that's one. And second is I actually never gave up. when I told my dad that I'm going to actually leave my admission to ISP and I'm going to start breweries, his first reaction was, "Have you gone nuts? Like, are you going to start a placement agency and what is going on in your head?" But I fought for it, and he was supportive enough to let me pursue my passion. And I don't see that enough in women today. Let me be very honest. In my organization, there are 120 folks, and out of that, about 60 are women, 50%. And when I interview women today, or I see my own colleagues who are women, I see them undercutting themselves all the time. They feel they're not good enough. Of course, there are external factors like family holding them back, but all of us hold ourselves back as well. You know, we think we're not good enough. We think that staying beyond 7 p.m. doesn't work. We need to be home early, etc., etc. Honestly, if you really put in your hard work, if you really put in your mind to something today, there are enough people, enough organizations in the space who support you to get you to where you want to be. But that persistence, that hard work, that wanting to become big, and that aspiration needs to come from you. Nobody else can do it. We can't do it for you. Nobody else can do it for you. And otherwise, also, I feel workplaces need to change. I personally have made this one change in my organization after hearing Vinita from Sugar Cosmetics, which is that if women in my workplace are crying, and we don't look down upon them. There are biological differences between men and women, which all men also here need to realize that they may not react the way you do. That doesn't mean that they're not equal or that they're not hardworking enough or that they're not strong enough. I think those notions also need to change majorly for all of us to feel very included in the organization or at work. So it's a food for thought for all of us. It needs to come from within for all of you. And there needs to be a conscious effort to make everyone feel a little more included.
Great. So you have four very, very powerful perspectives on women and the changing work. I'll add my own anecdote, not from my personal journey, but from my place of work. Okay, how many of you have heard of this line that says, "Women and goat don't have any road sense"? So that? Okay, so the easier one. Women are bad drivers. Right? Suna hai pucha. I didn't say if you believe it because if you do, I'll come and have a conversation with you one to one. I love driving, as Tanya mentioned. I've been driving since I was 14 within the compound, and then 18 months I got my license. But it's serendipity that I have landed in an organization which proudly boasts of an entire assembly line of luxury SUV cars, the Harrier and the Safari, that are made by an all-woman assembly line. I want to repeat that for you. This is a premium high-end car at Tata Motors Pune plant, where the entire assembly line is called the TCF2, where the entire assembly line from the worker to the supervisor is a woman. Now the question is that it wasn't important that अच्छा ये एक pilot किया तो कौन सा बड़ा तीर उखाड़ दिया. It was a commitment that took a 360-degree approach to the fact of integrating women in the value chain. And when I talk about changing world, the difference was over the last 100 years, we have asked women to come to the workplace. In fact, some people will also say we have allowed women to come into the workplace. But the fact is that when you ask them to come to the workplace, but the workplace itself has not been reconsidered for what it takes to be a woman, uh, talking more anecdotally, you're expecting the woman to leave her bladder and her uterus at home, right? So have you accommodated in your practice policy infrastructure for women to be in your workplace? And Tata Motors took a very, very holistic approach, and we'll come to that later. But we actually redesigned the assembly line to make it more convenient for women. We took part, we intervened in their diet, we intervened in their health, we spoke to their families and made sure that the community had a collective support. There is an entire entourage that ensures that the women are dropped home and there are marshals around, there are doctors on standby. So while the Factories Act does have a set of compliances, uh, the company went over and above. So the pilot that was done was basically to change the narrative. And what we all need to know about the workplace and the way it's evolving right now is that it's an evolving narrative where it's moved way beyond tokenism. That अच्छा रिसेप्शन पे चार औरतों को डाल देते हैं हमारा डाइवर्सिटी का काम हो गया, whereas engaging with women, putting them in a tough, unfamiliar place, and watching them excel. And I like to close at least this piece of data with you, where there's a video online about this assembly line. If you look it up, Tata Motors Harrier Safari line. There's this one girl from a village, interior Maharashtra, who in the course of the video says that मेरा मन है एक दिन जो गाड़ी मैंने बनाया है मैं उसे खरीदूं. And to me, that's the narrative that the world is changing with. Aspirations are connected to larger and larger ideas, and not just कि मैं घर के दिल्ली से निकल सकती हूँ, मैं स्कूल जा सकती हूँ, मैं नौकरी कर सकती हूँ, मैं एक 25 लाख का गाड़ी भी खरीद सकती हूँ, right? So that's the narrative that we are building across the sector. We have had so many perspectives. I'll set the next question for the ladies on my left, and that question talked about the transitioning of sectors or changing careers. Both of you have delved and you've referred to it in part in the previous question. But we would love to hear more about the fact that there is a crossover and changing industry piece that you did in your own careers, because that's again an interesting facet of the evolving workspace. So over to you, ladies.
So, like exactly like was said, from IIT Delhi, I took a very traditional career path. I went to this consulting firm, BCG. And the logic was that all the best seniors at IIT had gone to BCG. It was one of the highest paying job. So it was the most lucrative thing for me to do. And I did that for 4 years, and it was beautiful because it gave me access to understand how different industries work. How do people actually make money and how do businesses die. But while I was doing that, I felt that this is not what I am meant to be. This is not the place I want to become a partner and retire at, even though I know I make millions and billions. And that's where I was struck with a dream because I did a study and I talked about it a little bit, which said that there is a way to create technology that solar will become cheaper than coal. And that's the day I took a call that I want to enter the solar sector. The questions I was asked was that one, are you sure you want to leave BCG to start something which is right now known as a marginal CSR sector? Where you don't even know if you have a future, you'll actually be able to achieve that dream. And that too, in a world which is full of men. Thankfully, I had a lot of good men supporting me. I had my dad, I had my co-founders, both of them which happened to be men, who said, what's the harm? Let's take a shot. Let's try. What worse will happen? And if at that moment I would have stood back or I would have listened to all of those people, I wouldn't have been sitting here and talking to you. The most ironic thing is that the day I listed my firm, two of those people actually came to me and patted my back and said, what a visionary you were. How did you think in 2010 that you should enter solar? You are one of the first people who actually made this dream a reality. And I looked at it and I realized the hypocrisy that I shouldn't have listened to them then, and it doesn't matter, and I don't need to listen to them now. What matters is what I believe, and if I'm being true to that belief, if I'm being true to what my loved ones and the people who care for me have it for me. And this is a difficult choice most of you will face at some point or the other. You say, should I take the most traditional, high paying, what my seniors have done job, or what everybody around me is saying? And maybe that may be the right choice to take for us a little bit. But if you genuinely feel that you have a calling that you want to devote your time on, then do it. I love Nike when it says just do it. But if you decide to do it, then also decide that this is not a short. quick cooker cut. You will have to spend at least 7 to 10 years to do that, because this is not something that is like Maggie 2 minutes, banaya ho gaya. And like I said, you have to have your intrinsic motivation source, something that can keep you up and doing that. For me, that was to prove that analysis I did. That yes, even though today solar is 6 times the price of coal, I will get it cheaper. And I did. So you need to have that intrinsic source that keeps you driving and lets you put away all those comments that come to you to say you'll not be able to do it. Exactly like you said about bladder. Somebody asked me, how will you go to the remote villages? तुम्हें safety का problem नहीं है. How will you go to the washroom? I said, it's okay. I went to a site. It didn't have a female washroom. I just went to the male one. I said, the guys will have a problem, right? They didn't put a washroom for me. So you will figure solutions out. And it's not just the females out here. All you male guys, you will also figure solutions out. But you have to first have the will to say, I will do it. And that's the way you change the career path. Disproportionate creation doesn't come from a very traditional path. You have to twist and turn, and that will have its own challenges. But you have to stay with the challenge.
So actually very, very similar to yours. I thought I wanted to get into either Bain or BCG or McKinsey, and I interviewed for all three. And then I went to Econ, not any of these three, and I was feeling incredibly bad that, why did I not get to these consulting firms, etc. Now, one of the consulting firms, which is Bain, is their official blue collar workforce management report, Bloomie's features. It's one of the companies that they've researched upon, and that's one, exact feeling that I have. Yeah, full circle, right? So, and I'm very guilty of not believing myself. You had that belief. I'm so glad and inspired. But when I started Bloomie's, I think for one more year I kept thinking that if this is not going to go through, I'm going to go back to ISB, I'm going to go through this job again. That in that moment I never realized what a blunder I was doing. I wasn't focusing on what was in front of me and what I could get out of it, but I just kept questioning myself and thinking that I wasn't good enough to build this. And honestly, there was no one to tell me that you can do it. Honestly, if I did not realize it a year later, which I eventually did, I would have left. To me, then nobody would have said that this was the wrong decision to do. Everybody would have said, "Oh, you did the right thing. You've now done the traditional thing, and this makes more sense." And there are a lot of bias as well. So I also have two co-founders who are both males, and when you were deciding initially who's going to do what, it was just assumed that worker acquisition and field job and worker training is something that both of them will do. I'm not going to be good enough at it, and I don't stand a chance at it. Turns out, a year later, I'm 2 years into the business, I told them that, hey, you know what, you're doing a terrible job at it. I'm going to do it from here on. And now, at 2 weeks, along with marketing, customer acquisition, finance strategy, I look at training for workers, which is a field job, which requires me to actually go to field visits, have training centers, speak to these women, impart training to them. And that is again a full circle where from the beginning I thought that I wasn't good enough to even do marketing, to thinking that hey, the person in front of me is not good enough to do this or is not fit to do this, and I should take that from them and do it. And now I'm doing that. So that belief is very, very important. And sometimes you will have people who will support you, and sometimes you may not have them. So don't rely on them. Just rely on yourself. You're good enough. Um, yeah, those are my two key takeaways.
And totally from the horse's mouth, from very, very powerful women just owning their game. So I'll move to the right side and talk about the corporate culture, the other side of the coin, and specifically about imparting leadership to young women. So would love to hear from the two of you on your journey and your thoughts about it.
When I talk about leadership, I will have to talk about one of the early lessons that I got from my grandmother, actually. She used to say that there are three words in life that you pretty much need to imbibe, and these three words pretty much will define what you go on to become. The first one is learn, second one is earn, and the third one is return. And if you know what you are learning for today, you go on to earn, your earning is aligned to it, and you're returning as well. You don't have to wake up every morning thinking that I have to return. Return happens automatically. Tanya spoke about passion, and I will tell everyone in this room, please do not do anything where you do not bring in your passion. And when you bring in your passion is when you do your best, when you become a leader of self. And my early lesson of learning, earning, and returning actually led me to understand, how as a leader I can also return could be as simple as holding someone's hand. Today in the position that I am, I look at it not just as a privilege to do something for others, but and not just say that I'm doing, but throw the ladder and hold the hand as well. And I think that is a very important thing about leadership, not just sitting on your seat, but also making another person able enough. And yes, in corporate culture, we can compete, but I think a smarter way is yes, you will have to compete, but also collaborate. Because out of collaboration come wonders. So you have to think on your feet to see where you can compete and where you can collaborate. And when you make collaboration a part of your story, you automatically become a leader. You don't have to be going out and looking what are the leadership principles, what is the template of leadership. You create your own template. And I think all of us have that within us. We can look to our mothers, we can look to our fathers, anyone, people around you give you the inspiration to become leaders. And I think for me, learn and return has been a very important part of my journey of leadership.
I'll still stay on Eureka for a bit because we were discussing earlier about your journey from being a solo player in the sports journalism space to your Olympic experience. Why don't you share that with the audience? The contingent that we spoke about.
So, yes, today, because of course, having the privilege of being in the industry for the last 23 years, it's not just the work that I do with NDTV, it has given me the opportunity to train other women to become sports journalists. And my trainer collective called Women News and Sport that is spread across India, Asia, in the ASEAN countries and Pacific as well. We are today a collective, I'm one of the three trainers that train this part of the world. We are 58 women in the group, and of the 58, 50 of us made to the Paris Olympic Games this summer to cover the games. And I think I would imagine that was a high point for me, high point for all the women trainers who went with IIFT accreditations. Because yes, it is about throwing the ladder and also holding the hand, and that is when you become a true leader.
Okay, so coming back to your question on the corporate culture and leadership, Rika, you mentioned in my introduction that I work with companies on something called Women's Empowerment Principles. Now, Women's Empowerment Principles is a set of 7 principles that a CEO of a company commits to ensure that more women are part of, the leadership within the company. They have gender responsive policies, marketing policies, community policies, etc. So we did a survey of these 400 companies, which was an anonymous survey, and what we found is that most of the companies are struggling at 2 principles. One is women in leadership. The second is gender responsive procurement. Now, when it comes to women in leadership, and we just heard from Niharika that it's just a perception that that women can't be leaders, and that is what holds her back, assuming the same position years after when she was able to prove herself. So there is the issue is that the women have to prove themselves over and over again for the same thing that would be taken for granted for men. Number one. Number two, this unconscious bias, this perception also translates into our structures. Then when we have recruitment, retention, hiring, promotion policies, we look at women from that perspective and we do not create those opportunities for women to go upwards. Now, you know what? We were. How do we address that? Of course, there has to be more enabling ecosystem, enabling environment within the organizations to be able to, to address that. Now, if you would look at, the percentage of women in senior positions, I think it is less than 20%. Uh, we are able to reach that because there is a legislation that wanted the companies to put at least one woman at the board. Had it not been for that legislation, you could imagine where would women have been. So the fact is that of course there are push that is required at the structural, at the policy level to be able to create that environment. Each one of us has the responsibility. You are MBA students today. Tomorrow you will be joining the companies. You will be building your own. How do you then make sure that you create those opportunities for each and every one? Men and women alike, but also moving beyond binaries, right? So I think that it eventually comes to the fact that we need to have an enabling ecosystem and try to look at where these biases are coming in and where these constraints are coming in and how can we eliminate them.
If I may add a very small thing for each one of you to think as a leader is be empathetic. One of the things I have seen the team relate to me the most is one, when I have shared my vulnerable moments with them, opened up that what I am feeling about the success or the deal that we have lost or something that's going at home or why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. And two, relating to what they are saying. Because you don't realize you end up spending more time with your team than you even spend with your better half. So they are more than your family. So you have to show your emotion side to them. And as women, it comes naturally to us, but all those guys out there, remember to open up, to show who you actually are. And that's the real bonding that you'll have as a leader with your team.
Absolutely right. So I'm literally on the fence when it comes to the entrepreneur side and the corporate side because I've spent little time and more time on crossovers. So I'll take a little bit of work to share my journey as well. I ran away from a small town called Jamshedpur. Some of you may have heard of Tata Steel. My father worked there. I told him engineer nahi padna, just because you're good at math doesn't mean you have to become an engineer. I was very clear media mein jana hai, literature padna hai, and finally I want to be in an editorial position. So I lived my dream for 15 years, and ironically, or maybe fortunately, I had an offer from Tata Steel asking me to join Tata Steel back in the east of the country, but in a role of a communication head. So it's again we're talking about full circles. This was, of course, my father had the last laugh saying, "तुमने तो कहा था Tata Steel के लिए काम नहीं करेगी." But yeah, it happened, and I crossed over from media to the corporate side. Subsequently, I also worked with the Tata Steel Foundation, which is a social sector, and DI was something that I was sharing with my co-panelists before the session. That it's been something that I've been very passionate about, and I didn't really realize I was contributing till someone actually held a mirror on what I had done and said, "But you have done A, B, C, D in your past roles, and you don't realize it." So there's an interesting cusp there that the overlap of passion, what you're good at, and where you add value to the larger ecosystem. For those of you who know, this is a Japanese concept of ikigai, and ikigai is a fantastic way of asking yourself some deep questions about where you want to be, what you want to do, and how you want to earn a living. And because I've kind of been an entrepreneur for a bit, and I've spent many years in fact, I jokingly say that my career is as old as most of you in the room. Is that You heard about passion, you heard about, proving yourself till your conviction becomes real. You heard about being a solo warrior, Akra Chalore, you must have heard, till taking other people along with you. And you also heard about creating a systemic involvement of women in leadership roles, in other kinds of equity that you can create for women to be in the workspace. Guys, I'm telling you because I've been on several panels in the last, half year or so. This is a masterclass that you just experienced. And this is not by design, it's completely by chance. But what you heard from these women on stage, you will get in very, very premium masterclasses. So I'm hoping all of you are giving a good solid ear to what we are discussing on this stage, because I'm learning, even in spite of my journey. I think I've learned a little bit from all of you all. In the interest of time, how are we doing on time? Because we had said 10 minutes for Q&A. One set of questions. All right. I think all of us were very keen that we don't just talk about women empowerment and also talk about creating a larger ecosystem on engaging allies and engaging the society at large. So I'll start with Suneda because I know you spoke about the care balance, but you also had a very interesting topic we're discussing about the stereotyping in advertising. And we'll take this question to everyone, and then maybe we could open to the Q&A. Over to you.
Thank you. So one of the things that we work at UN Women is something called Unstereotype Alliance, which is an alliance of many renowned marketing media brands and advertising agencies. And one of the things that we realize that in the advertisements that we see, most of the times it is not a true reflection of ourselves. Men are presented in a very stereotypical way, women are presented in a very stereotypical way, and certain sections of society are completely erased. They're not there even in the advertising. And you know how advertising in popular culture plays a very important role in shaping norms and attitudes. So one of the things that we work with is to really see that how we can work with these media and advertising agencies to make the advertising, in a manner that they are not promoting non-stereotypical depiction of both men, women, and those beyond binaries, which is very very important in shaping attitudes and norms for a gender equal world. But I also wanted to say that, my message to you and my request to you is really, share the work. It's the responsibility of, गांधी जी का ये तलस्म है घर का काम सबका काम. तो क्यों ऐसा होता है कि सिर्फ we have to think that when it is a care work, it is ultimately a woman's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. So if everybody plays and contribute, to that, we would have more equal world. And of course, in this entire journey of gender equality and women's empowerment, men plays a very very important role as allies, and that is where we see a more sort of a collaborative approach that you mentioned, Rika, but also we're trying to see how we can be supportive for each other and create equal opportunities for all. So we take over.
I would say I wouldn't have been where I am had it been had I if I didn't have two very very important and powerful male allies. I would say one was my father, who believed that I could do what I am doing because he would say that if you're passionate about scaling the Mount Everest, you can, and no one can stop you. So that actually helped me scale where I have scaled. The other person is, he was my boss, my first boss in NTV. His name is Dr. Pranal Roy. I don't know how many of you sitting in this room know the kind of contribution he has had towards Indian media. He changed one would say he changed the game called Indian media. And, he believed in my ability to be a sports journalist, my ability to report on sports that many would not, touch, something like, a baseball or a set of takraw or any other Olympic sport. When, I wasn't the one who came into the field knowing about everything, but I learned. I spent every day some time in learning what I am passionate about and the kind of skill that I have to work on. There is a certain part of the day I dedicate to learning, and this is something I had learned from Dr. Roy in my very early days, that if I have to move up the ladder, then I have to learn. And my other colleagues, who primarily are men, have to support me. I have to put my foot down and tell them, look, I have to be good enough at my work, so give me the time, assist me, support me to become who I want to become. It is very important to find those male allies in the system. It is very important to find that guy or those few guys who will walk with you in dark alleys and reach you to safety, find a taxi for you, stand outside when you have to use a male's washroom. I have done it for years and years. You will find those men in the system, and those men are your allies.
I'll actually tell you one very story that has stayed with me, which my co-founder once gave me, and he said that somebody say I'm wearing a very expensive watch, and that watch falls down. I look at it, I look at chat, I be like shit, that watch has fallen. I feel so hurt. I like what has happened to it. In the same moment, say Amrita is wearing that watch, and that watch falls down, and Amrita is getting sad and says, "It's okay, relax, it's just a watch." The incident is exactly the same. The only thing that has changed is I have removed I or me from the equation. He said to me, "Tujhe gyan dene ka bahut shauक hai. You love to give advice. So next time you're having a question or a doubt, talk to the mirror as if you're talking to me and give me advice on what I should do. Remove you from the equation. Sometimes you limit yourself by putting a bias of your own self, or you get sad. But the same thing, if you ask somebody else to do, you will do very differently. So that advice I've started using to say, talk to the mirror. Sometimes when I get on something say, this is not possible, I'll not be able to do this. I talk to the mirror as if I'm talking to him and say, okay, this is the problem, okay, do this, do that. And I try and removing the me from the picture. So for all of you all, experiment. Talk to the mirror, give it advice.
With this exercise, so till the time I was about 14 or 15, I would stammer. And I couldn't string a sentence together. I would stammer. One of the best suggestions that, again, my therapist gave me, talk to the mirror to overcome your fear of
And
self.
she's a leading anchor on sports today.
I used to stammer till the age of 15 and speak the way I am today and perhaps decently enough, then everyone can.
Take the me out of the picture. All of us like giving advice. Please give that advice without putting yourself in the frame.
One more thing is that, you spoke about allies, and sometimes you may not have those allies, but you need to have the persistence to convert them into allies. A very small example is that my dad is a reasonable man, but of course he is from the patriarchal society that he is, and he wouldn't, in the first go, maybe understand what I was thinking, when I thought of starting movies. It was my responsibility that I took on myself to come up with the pros and cons and what am I going to lose, and I have the courage to maybe, even if at the end of it, at the end of this entire thing, if I lose, I still have the courage. I still have the courage to maybe face this failure and move on. And I spoke to him about it, maybe 2, 3 conversations with my mom, with him, and he came around. He understood. And he's probably my biggest supporter now. So sometimes I don't see that happening. Sometimes we have this. Of course, it should be that way. That people should understand themselves. But if you just go that little mile extra to, you know, make someone your ally, I'm sure people try and come around. Similarly with my co-founders, right? Maybe a lot of times they didn't realize that inherently they were being biased about a lot of situations. But when I showed them the light, when I showed them certain instances where it was happening, they were conscious enough to understand, realize, accept, change. Um, and that's very important. And one more thing is, it doesn't have to, you don't have to start changing when you say probably become a husband, father, because you're giving those kind of examples. Today, I think when you go back home, I don't know if this is a resident course or if you go back home, how many of you actually met your mothers? How many of you are actually sitting on the table and your mom is that happens, right? You're sitting and your mom brings in your food on your table and then she's picking up the plate or sister is picking up the plate. How many times have you really stood up for your sister in front of your parents? Where your parents have discouraged her for something, for any course, any job, anything. And you said that no, I can do it, why can't she? So I think we need to be change makers today, at this age, at whatever age we are. And see whatever bits we can do. And of course, in future, when you become future husbands, mothers, employers, have that sensitivity, have that um, intervention in yourself where you realize that if I don't change, if I don't change the norm, no one else will.
The pause she took, she was coming from a deep place inside. Yeah. So you've heard all of us. I'll add my two bits on resetting the global space. The biggest and the toughest part of any kind of culture change is mindset change. Behavior शायद हम बदल भी ले, but mindset change होने में time लगता है. And I'll share an anecdote from somebody I think most of you all know. Bachelvi Pal का नाम सुना है? Yes. So Bachelvi Pal ma'am and I, we worked closely when I was in Tata Steel, and I've interviewed her on her, of course, on her fantastic legend of conquering Mount Everest. And ironically, Jamshedpur as a city has 12 Everesters. Okay, so because we have a adventure foundation there. But what interesting thing happened was Bachelvi Pal ma'am and a cohort of people decided to do something called Mission Gange. Any of you Mission Gange, Gange, where they decided to raft from Patna to Rishikesh and clean up the Ganga on the way. And these were volunteers and they rafted, they walked, they rafted, they walked, and this was a very, very physically laborious process. And they actually, cleaned murky things, waste. If I can share with you, shit on the thing. And even in bananas, we saw half-burnt corpses. All of that was really, really tough. But when I asked her, कि ma'am, ना ये तो Mount Everest climb किया है ना, ये तो horizontal है. This couldn't have been tough. And she said, अमृता, ये 100 एवरेस्टों से भी ज़्यादा difficult था. क्योंकि जब हम साफ कर देते वहाँ के खड़े जो लोग थे बोलते कर लीजिए कुछ फर्क नहीं आने वाला कल फिर से गंदा हो जाएगा. Right? So I'm sharing this anecdote with you because the truth of human nature couldn't be more blatant. That if we don't recognize the biases that we unconsciously or consciously practice every day, men or women, and I really feel that gender equity is as much about men as women because imagine being told you can't cry when you feel grief. Imagine being told you can't nurse your ailing child because a mother is more suited for that. You're told कि आप सद्भावना नहीं दिखा सकते because boys don't kind of support each other. You're told things that are also putting men in boxes they don't want to be in, right? So equity is much about that, and I hope in the conversations that we have set out today, in the topic we were given about women in the workplace and creating an equal environment for I would say not just women but for everyone at the workplace. And one of the points that's relevant for all of us to question that not only for stereotypes and not only for the journeys that all of us have taken and most of you all will, also question things we take for granted. One last question from my side. Who can define GDP for me? The value of all goods and products that are produced in the country, that's transactional, right? So there is a profit element to it, and that's how you calculate growth. It's a universally accepted yardstick for development, right? What's the fundamental problem of taking GDP as a measure of economy? Doesn't include care work. It doesn't include the unpaid, invisible labor that goes into keeping society in balance while the manufacturing or it's a form of economics, but the fact is there is an invisible cost to that. And if you are not addressing the invisible cost to the unpaid economy, the definition of GDP is a flawed one because you are measuring something that you have conveniently carved out from an ecosystem, and that's a global problem. It's not even a domestic problem, right? To even be conscious of the fact that certain definitions that were made were typically designed, the workplace was designed for a Caucasian white male, and it was not designed for an average woman of color. Historically, those who साल हो गए, but no change has really been impacted at a policy level, at an infrastructure level, fast enough for us to normalize this. So my closing remarks before we open the session to questions is that all of you as professionals, please take a hard look on systems and processes that have been historically not upgraded, not being upgraded. And that's where half the problem lies, and the other half, as you've heard from everybody on the panel, is in the micro and the macro, our own minds, our immediate environments, and policies and systems that we are looking at. So think about that, be the change that all of us want. So that's it from our side. We would love to hear any questions. You can address it to anybody in the panel. But it's been invigorating for me, and I hope it has been for you. But some counter views, some deeper questions, most welcome.
Can I just add a very quick point to you? The very interesting, if you Google, NASA had to cancel, one of the trips for astronauts because the suits were were designed for men, and they could not take women astronauts because the suits were not designed for them. And this is NASA, and this is what we're talking about. So, yeah, let me put it there. Yes, leaders of tomorrow, right minds of the future. Come first from you.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Rohit from the Battle 26. So, when we are talking about the general discourse around uplifting the marginalized, there is this new concept in the West which is known as intersectionality, which is when multiple marginalized identities of intersect for the same person and create large institutional barriers. Now, I have experience and maybe I have a different biased view is that that same discourse is not being translated in India. So what I wanted to ask is that from a policy point of view, ma'am, what is something that we can do to make sure that the affirmative actions that we are taking to openly be marginalized is actually proportional to the level of intersectionality that particularly women in India are facing?
Quite a question. But if I understood correctly, you're talking about intersectionality, right? Yes. So I would say it's not a Western concept. From the development sector perspective, intersectionality plays a very, very critical role in gender equality and women's pursuit. Just to answer that question, women are not a homogeneous category. Women from a woman who is uneducated, living in a rural area, belongs to a Dalit community, would not have the same, access to opportunities or access to justice, if I may say so. Vis-a-vis the woman who is like me, who's staying in Delhi, has education, working in a job. So, when you're looking at policy responses to them, the intersectional approach has to be taken into consideration. And India, I would say, have done a very, very good job in terms of those reservations. In terms of now, I mean, this is a bit sort of it's a hot topic. People have different kind of opinions, but the fact is that there is a historical discrimination, and if you have to level the playing field, you have to create those policies where you at least bring those people because of their intersectionalities to the level that everybody stands equal. So so your policies should be able to look at and should be able to include positive discrimination or things like that too.
And I'll add to that, first are familiar with the three P's, right? Three P's, the triple bottom line, right? So one of the things that shook me up a lot a few years back was the author of this paper, John Elkington. He actually withdrew his paper, and that's rare because you recall products, you don't recall a thesis. He actually recalled his paper saying I was wrong because even with a triple bottom line approach, we will not be able to sustain business at the rate we are going currently. So I completely align with where you're coming from, and what he has actually proposed is that we need, we cannot just work with the triple bottom line, we need to have exponential transformation. And exponential transformation will come from whether it's a CSR limb, whether it's a diversity limb, whether it's at policy level, it cannot be incremental anymore. There is a call for us as an ecosystem for sustainable businesses on the corporate side and on the entrepreneurship, the startup space. That if you are not building sustainable business keeping the triple bottom line in mind, you not only have to keep the triple bottom line in mind, you also have to make it exponential in the transformation for it to be sustainable for each of those three P's. So that's the push right now with climate related disclosures, with lot of discussion at Davos, with lot of companies coming together for sustainable businesses. So somewhere the linkage with sustainability to representation of underserved communities is getting linked now in a positive way. So that's a good news for us. But is enough work happening? I agree with you, not enough is happening.
You mentioned that we need to be empathetic as well. But at times we need to make decisions which are hard calls as well. So how do you maintain the balance between
That's a great question, and it's a question most leaders struggle with at like most times. I balance it sometimes by saying if I would switch places, right, what would it happen? If it's lack of performance, bad intent on the other side, or something which is just malicious behavior, then empathy doesn't play. But everywhere else, you do. If somebody is in deep trouble and there is important work, right, you have to prioritize the fact that the person cannot be do. So you need to build backup options. Having said that, you have to take hard calls as well. The easiest way to take the hard call is to be transparent. You tell the person that I understand this is the situation you are in, but this is the situation I am in. What is the path that we can figure out together? That maybe that you are not there for it, but you empower somebody else to do it. But it is about opening up and showing your vulnerability as well. And being hard when you see that the other side is actually misusing you by either being wrong or something else. So it's a fine balance which you need to assess.
One thing to add to that, what you said, even in my organization, intent issue or dishonesty are absolute no breakers for me. So eventually, you will also develop what is a no breaker for you and what are those areas where you would like to negotiate and explore. But yeah, to each their own. Uh, but yeah, you find that for yourself.
And don't be afraid to make a mistake. You will. It's a part of leadership. The important part is you learn from that and next time say, "Achha, this situation I shouldn't have been empathetic, while here I should have." It is a process of learning by doing.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Garima Dixit. I've been 21 years of service in Army and presently I'm in transition and I'm pursuing a course, media course
which we have an opportunity uh, from Indian Army and Indian Armed Forces per se, and we are a batch of 45 this force, and the women as a increase me to come here and just I was patiently listening to you all, and very wonderful insights you've given, and finding your own ikigai. That was a wonderful takeaway, and I'm a true believer in this. I have 21 years in services that I have also been. So what I feel that a woman has to perform twice as amount as work to be recognized as half as equal to her male counterpart. So what are your thoughts about it? Have you ever felt this? And how you have overcome this? I just wanted to know your experience. I'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Yes, I have felt it all along. I feel it even today. And I think I mentioned that even today, when I walk into the newsroom, when I walk into, say, cover whatever I'm covering, even the Supreme Court, I need to know what my subject is 360-degree. I need to have my research impeccable. I actually need to know everything about what I'm going to be reporting on a given day so that I'm not challenged. And I do twice as much research as my male colleagues and so that I'm never questioned. No one is ever able to point a finger at me. I think we women are born with this fear of failure. If we fail, then what? While, over a period of time, I have overcome the fear of failure because today I'm not as hard on myself as I used to be 20 years ago. However, I do not want to take a false step. It's like taking that false step and falling. So I do not want to fall, and hence I am on my guard.
One more thing to that, even when it comes to connecting with your bosses and, you know, for example, I don't drink or smoke, and it is incredibly hard for me to connect with my male colleagues who, go out for carnival and I don't know what not. Yeah? And I have to put in extra work and extra effort at workplace to feel more included and to say that, hey, I'm also friendly just because I'm not smoking. Doesn't mean that I'm not. And traditionally, less women smoke compared to men. So these challenges are very real. They happen, I feel you. And you're right. We are putting in twice the extra effort, maybe more, 10 times more in a lot of situations. I completely echo what she's saying.
I'll just add to that specifically the fact that I've been in a male dominated industry. The effort is there, sometimes even more. And sometimes the perks are also there. I raise my voice in a room full of men in a board at the ministry. I get heard. Right? I need to know my subject. I can't say jargon. But if I say it out loud with that confidence, I'm heard. Most of the times, I can get sad or get pulled back by all that extra effort I'm doing. But all the good things I'm getting, I take it as granted. मेरे तो मिल रहा ही था. Right? So we have to also take that into perspective and remember all those nice things as well that I got the opportunity of because I was the female in the room.
And I'll probably add a funny anecdote. So I happen to be on the board of Fiji Sports, and on the board there are 7 other men. I'm the only woman, and often when we are sitting at a table, the men are talking to each other. Even when I'm trying to put something across, they're not listening to me. So one day I called for a chair that I could crank up to max, and I am above all of them. I could get myself or try that.
We discussed that urban women and are participating less than. So what are the barriers that stopping urban educated women that against connection, both educated and knowledge, enter into
So I think quite a few care work for the rural women, but then the rural women do not have the privilege to not work. at least at the urban women, because they belong, come largely from, so privileged background, they would rather than not do double work until and unless there is a significant opportunity for them to trade off. Then there are issues of safety, of course, which are very, very critical. There are issues of mobility, which are therefore everywhere. Globally, 1 in 3 women, and that is irrespective of rural or urban area, suffers violence. So, but I think the saddest part is rural women do not have the choice to be able to leave that work, and
It's the necessity that drives it. The necessity to drive the home is dependent on them.
And the other, perhaps a positive story is also that the intervention of Anganwadis and support systems in the rural areas, they create community safe spaces for children to be left. But I have heard of enough stories where mothers actually tied a rope to the child against the bed and left them because she had to go to the field or to the factory. These are realities, but yes, there have been positive interventions where because of community level care and social sector interventions, the infrastructure is actually improved in the rural system vis-a-vis the urban system. So that's again a positive discrimination that's happened.
But just can I also go back to the fact that for the longest time we have been categorized as a jobless growth economy as well. If you would have looked at the economists and papers, right? So, of course, there is economic growth on one hand, but the kind of jobs that are created is also something which women need more flexibility because of multiple things, and they want to work closer to their home because there is an issue of safety, there is an issue of mobility. So, all these factors really play a very important role when it comes to women's, participation in jobs.
So much more for thought. I think what will close with is let's keep an open mind, let's become the part of the change that we want to see. And in a truly equitable work, hard work, success, excellence will have no gender. That's when we actually stop talking about diversity when diversity is it's at its best. So let's just hope that all adjectives become non-gendered and it doesn't matter which gender you are, and it's only excellence, only hard work, only success. Thank you everybody for being a wonderful audience.
Thank you, everyone. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists, Ms. Suhela Khan, Ms. Amrita Gamuri, Ms. Shrika Rawat, Ms. Tanya Singhal, and Ms. Niharika Jain for generously sharing their time and valuable insights during this engaging discussion. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to the administration and the Trade Unions Committee for this exceptional session possible. We would also like to thank Aspire for Her for their constant support. A special thanks to all the students and attendees for being part of this event. As a token of our appreciation, we would now like to present our guest with memento.
Keep it. Another type C है. नहीं नहीं इसको मत नहीं पूरा सिस्टम ना ना ये नहीं हटा रहे उसे इधर रखो इससे भी छोटी है मेरे को आयरन में दिखा हुआ है
Guys, there's no break right now. Just take your seats, please. If you really have to go, then only you can go. Just other than that, please take your seats. Guys, take your seats, please.
हेलो वेट रुको पहले वो वहां का गेट बंद करो एक सेकंड आई सेड वेट
Guys,
I said
guys, come back, please.